Greetings, I'm Mark with Unlimited Story, unlimited-story.com, a channel dedicated to writing, world building, marketing, and most importantly, getting things done. In this video, I am with Audrey Sapper, the author of Passion Rising, which is a book that I have already reviewed, and it was quite an experience because I had not read I think I'd only had 2 or 3 romances under my belt, and I was kind of blown away, most specifically about all the historical references, which we're going to be covering very, very shortly. So right out of the gate, why don't you tell me a little bit about you, Audrey?
Well, I'm Audrey Sapper. That's my new name. I'm a writer. By day, I'm a freelance writer, ghostwriter. The less I say about that, the better. It's not as interesting as it sounds. That's why it's actually really boring.
I heard that's the case with ghostwriting and stuff. It's like, hey, we just don't talk about it because it's not as exciting or juicy.
Celebrity biographies, and I'm like, PowerPoints, white papers, patent disclosures. Yeah, it's talk about being haunted. Jesus. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, and I was in academia for a long time. Like, sometimes people say, like, I spent 5 to 7 years in such and such prison. I spent about 6, 7 years in grad school. Depending on the day, sometimes I authentically had a really good experience in my master's. I learned a lot about film and historical research from the media perspective there. PhD was getting a little carried away. That department I was in actually no longer even exists, so bummer. But I did get a lot of skills in historic research and using libraries and reading really fast and BSing stuff I read or didn't read very fast. So that's kind of why I was interested in historic fiction. I mean, I've always loved reading it. I see Passions Rising sort of as more historical fiction than romance, although it's kind of like, I don't know, I kind of go back and forth on how one would categorize it, but... Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you right out of the gate, it sounds like you have a lot of tools at your disposal. More disposable
tools. I mean, especially if the cops are coming.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'll just say those are a lot of tools that give you a lot of options and power for writing historical fiction, right?
Yeah, no, I'm really lucky that I had, the educational and professional experiences that I've had. Like, really, I mean, I wouldn't say to everybody, like, spend your 20s in grad school making, like, $3,000 a year. Like, don't do that. But, like, definitely, I was really lucky that I was able to do that. I was lucky that I got to make a choice. And I was lucky that at least, my skills, like, ossified in the way that they did, like, so that I know how to do this stuff, because it is, I find it awesome.
And it's probably very interesting and almost easy for you to find these resources now, just because of your background.
Yeah, I mean, easy / compulsion. Like I know where to look and where to find stuff, and I think especially in the past year and a half, one of the silver linings of the world.
The plague.
What?
The plague, as I like to call it.
Yeah, just a weak gesture at the world. Like, is that a lot of things have gone digital, like a lot of historical sources, like museums, a lot more academic articles, which is my jam because I'm a masochist. A lot of stuff is just easier to access than ever before. Like, what's his name? Like Mark, whatever he was, like that Mark Ronson. No, like the podcast is, it's a great time to be a writer. No, it's a great time to research historical fiction, like right now. That's pretty much the only good thing we can say about this right now. Like someday, like in 100 years, like maybe like my great granddaughter will be like writing historical fiction, and like 2021, it was a great time to write historical fiction. Everything else sucked.
Well, now we know, and I think a lot of authors will agree. Staying at home over those last few years has been great for our writing. At least we were able to get some stuff done. So let's get into a little bit about Passion Rising.
Yeah.
I've read your first 3, so I at least know the basis of it. Can you give me your quick, 1-minute elevator pitch?
Okay, well, like the quickest elevator pitch, I guess, would be sort of like, maybe like American Girl meets Jane Austen meets Girls. Is that too many girls? Like, I don't know, but like, like the...
I mean, it's a school of girls, right?
Yeah, it was in the shortest way of putting it, but it's focuses on a protagonist named Mary, that's supposed to be her over there, sort of. She is an orphan in New Orleans who's an apprentice baker for Mrs. Howery, who I learned was a real historical figure in New Orleans. She was called like the bread mother, or bread like, woman of New Orleans. I wrote it down because I'm always messing up her title. Bread lady of New Orleans. And Mary, being an orphan, she grew up in an orphanage, and now she's living in a boarding house, which was a real institution Mrs. Howery ran alongside the Ursuline nuns. And I wasn't able to find that much information about it as an institution, so I got really interested in it. And Mary, when the story opens, there's a fly, because Mary tragically is not a very good baker. Like, you know, she's nearsighted, she has maybe some ADHD, she's really interested in business, which is tough in 1860 if you're a girl, and also just not rich. And bless her, she's just not, she's just not a great baker. But she has a best friend who was in the orphanage with her. They get caught up in intrigue really fast when they kind of do what 18 and 19-year-old girls do. They sneak out. They get mixed up with some intrigue with, like, fortune teller, or maybe not, and a handsome guy who saves them, or maybe not. And so when the story begins, Mary is kind of at this sort of kind of a juncture in her life of kind of transitioning to being more of an adult from having been an orphan in an institution. And she leans really heavily on her close friendship with her friend Letty. And she's excited about following this path of like apprenticeship, and then I'm just going to be like just like my hero, Mrs. Howery. And she's going to kind of discover maybe these things aren't what they seem, and maybe she doesn't really want to court this guy who shows up and with a wagon at just the right second, and maybe her friendship with Letty isn't really what it seems. And so like the way I've sketched out kind of the first season of the work is sort of there's conflicts, passions, if you will, rising, like not just in the backdrop of like, oh, fall 1860, didn't some things happen then, but also, some emerging conflict, and because a bunch of young women living in a house, a lot of intrigue and friendships and arguments about sewing and whatnot. And this is probably way more than 1 minute. I mean, it's a big elevator, imagine.
We're going for a big elevator. And let me actually pause you for a second. What would you say your biggest draw is about this story that you feel is really something that readers could get behind and really get attached to?
That's a good question. I think I've become very attached to Mary as a protagonist because I wanted to paint her as somebody who's really flawed, but really relatable, and really in a time of growth and change in her life. I mean, it sounds kind of hippy-dippy, but she's kind of starts the story as just a naive, headstrong teenager, and I like to think she grows and changes over time. And one thing I've enjoyed about writing it, in addition to the historical stuff, is that pretty much every character has a backstory. It isn't exactly what one might think from even the first 3 episodes. Even the Fly.
Let's get into the Fly real quick, because the Fly I find to be an incredibly interesting character. That now, please just spoil it for me. Is that Fly dead? Did it die in episode 1? Is it still alive in the bread?
It is not still alive in the bread.
My favorite character, Toast.
It may have offspring.
May have had offspring.
They might be, in the back of that, because 19th century bakeries, there wasn't like OSHA, there wasn't like health inspections, It could be. Like,
well, let's get talking about the historical component, because I find this to be fascinating, and one of the best things that I really enjoyed about your story is I felt like I was like really there, even though I have very little idea of what it was like back in those days around the early 1900s, right?
1860.
1860. See, I was already a half century off. But whatever the case, obviously I wasn't there. I have really no idea of what it was like. But I got a really good vibe. Like, okay, there are carriages. This is how women were treated. Those were one of the biggest things. Specifically, I remember in the first episode, the amount of heat that she had when she was just baking and just sweating her buns off. Which, hold on, I am going to pause for a second. This book, if you guys like baking, has the most killer baking I don't know if it's making puns or references, because what was it? The dude's butt was like a bunch of French rolls or something. I just remember something like that in there. Maybe I'm just making that up now. Whatever the case, I'm getting sidetracked again. Specifically, how did you pull off the research? Since this is the best time ever in the history of the world to be researching, share this wealth of knowledge.
Well, I mean, I guess part of it is I just like history to begin with. So I feel like I probably have a somewhat solid background, maybe compared to somebody who's just like, you know what, I've never done this before and I want to try something new. And that's totally a great place to start. I wouldn't ever want to discourage anybody. I think one of the first things I did when I thought, like, all right, Vela, that sounds like a thing. I want to do something different from a lot of my other writing. And I really like New Orleans. I went there once. I really wish I could have spent more time there. I'd love to learn more about it. Mm-hmm. If anything in the world ever comes back, then I could write it off as a business expense to go there and do research. Mm-hmm. Maybe, I wonder if my accountant will see this. Then I'm also, like, the Civil War was something I kind of grew up with in my house, because my dad actually was a historical fiction writer of the Civil War. And my dad was fond of doing things like, let's, all your friends are going to Disney World this summer, we're going to go on a road trip to Civil War battlefield in chronological order. So even though I pretty much blocked all that out, and it's like, left home, and when I became an adult, some of it stuck with me. But I guess, so, like, I kind of started with a place and thinking about a time, because I really like regional writing. I like the challenge of trying to represent the nuances of a place in an interesting way.
Okay.
Rather than just, like, kind of hammering people over the head with it. Mm-hmm. And then I went on YouTube, because I was like, I wonder if there's some good documentaries on New Orleans in, like, the 19th century. And I thought, I wanted to sort of set up a challenge for myself, because I wanted to write about the Civil War era, but I didn't want to do anything that would, like, glorify slavery in any way. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to represent, like, rich people. And I feel like as a white person, I definitely am not really qualified to write about a major, like the story of a protagonist, even though, that is a major secondary plot in the first season.
Right. So it's like writing about the caste system and stuff is what you're referring to?
Yeah, kind of. Okay. I mean, like, I guess I have all these books behind me. Like, I'm just interested in everyday life, like, sort of the philosophy surrounding it. And, like, I know the term world building, like, as you use it, might mean, I'm not that familiar with what that means in practice. Okay. But I see, like, the practice of trying to write authentically about a historical period as, like, I would consider it, like, just naively from not really knowing what that term entails, like, sort of a similar process. Because I wanted the things that aren't supposed to be big and important, because I feel like that's the best way into a different place and time, So I wanted, like, one of the best tools I've used is newspapers.com, because you can just kind of, like, because newspapers were really important in this era, the 1860s, like.
And that type of information is very factual too. I mean, compared to, like, the news now, where a lot of stuff is kind of bumped up or whatever.
The newspapers then, I mean, they were actually, some of them were, especially in the run-up to the Civil War, very, very, very balanced. Like, it was very, like, just looking at, like, the ads and the little notices, like, oh, so-and-so broke their ankle on the way to the parlor or something, like, it's very...
I mean, it tells you a lot, okay, the small town, everyone knows everyone kind of thing. Yeah. And even when you look at ads, okay, this is what people were looking at. This is what people were buying. This is what people were selling at the time. Okay, that is really neat. Okay.
And, so, like, archive.org is another really good one. Like, because I know in one of I think it's episode 5, Mary and her, compatriots at the boarding house are reading Godey's Lady Book, which, if you're not familiar, it was like a really famous magazine that's kind of beginning, like, I want to say the 1840s, and it was one of the first national magazines in America, and it had dress patterns and serial fiction, which I thought was hilarious, and little news clippings about things. Like, one of the things Mary mentions in episode 5 is, like, there's a little article in one of the issues I looked at of Godey's Lady Book. There was a little article about one of the first female medical students in the Northeast.
Okay.
I don't remember if the little comment about that made that into the final draft yet, but like, it's like little things like that just I thought it's a fascinating magazine because it was like kind of the first female mass culture written in America. So, and wonderfully, all the issues of it are not they're not copywritten because they're pre 1922. So you can read basically all of them online for free, which is awesome. And I just like to, I wanted to like kind of immerse myself in that because it's like the grand gestures of history are not really what most people are part of. And as a reader, I don't really like historical fiction where it's like, oh, and then I delivered a pizza to Hitler, or oh yes, and I shined Abraham Lincoln's shoes, or something like where it's just very forced. I always hate that as a reader because I think like to be like pretentious, I guess, like it's like I'm forced to like.
It's almost like name dropping someone, like, hey, this is my historical fiction. Here I meet important person here. But and I do like what you mentioned about how there's everyday experience because I don't need anything forced on me. Like, hey, if this is a story about the Civil War, I don't need you talking about if you're going into the Civil War, you don't need to talk about every single general because no one would have met every other general. Travel during those times just really isn't.
Cared. I mean, not nobody, but I mean, like average people, like Mary's 18, she's just trying to survive, and it kind of gets harder and harder for her to kind of stay neutral as the story goes on. But she's not thought about it because her attitude is sort of like, well, I can't vote. I just do what the nuns tell me to do because that sort of results in not getting screamed at, and I don't have much of an opinion, I guess.
So like you said, it's an everyday kind of person who's just getting by, and this is kind of their progression, which actually works out pretty well for serial because it's just it's like a progression. Right?
Because I wanted to make something that was a narrative that would sustain itself for a lengthy amount of time until my Vela retirement plan kicked in.
So let's talk about how long this Vela is going to be because I want to cover like the meat and potatoes right now.
Yeah,
so
sorry,
no, it's all good. It's good. How long do you plan on going with this Vela? How long do you think it's conceptually? How long do you think it's going to go?
It kind of depends, like sort of how Vela itself goes. I mean, I have an outline for like what could probably be, I don't know, like maybe around 100 episodes, but I'm not because I wanted Mary's story to kind of go for the whole.
Like an arc, not necessarily hero's journey, but for her to go through like a series of events where she comes out a different person.
Yep. I mean, like I kind of, the more I thought about it, like I feel like it's a story of love, but there's multiple types of love. And one of the things I think, as cheesy as that sounds, like it's also about friendship and about learning to love what you do for a living and being okay with yourself and all that stuff. And so I wanted like a lot of time, space to examine that stuff.
Okay.
And I mean, if Vela kind of vanishes in the next 90 days or so, like some people are saying it might, maybe I would just kind of cut it down and try it novel format, which would be shorter and trimmer. But
okay.
I don't know.
Okay. All right, and I do want to go a little bit into reference material. So if I was going to go up to you and was like, Audrey, you are the most incredible person who has all the hookups for resources. Where would you tell me to go besides like the library?
At first, I would say your local library, because again, a lot of places have digitized a lot more resources since COVID, and that's a really great resource that a lot of people don't, always think to look at. Another resource I would suggest would be looking at kind of the historical societies or organizations that might be related to the era you're interested in. Like, I've done a lot of research on my father's family because I like life on hard mode, so I waited till they were all dead, and then I decided to start researching my family.
Then you got to know them because it's so much easier to ask them questions, right?
When they're dead, like
super easy.
That's great historical research.
Yep.
But one of the useful things I got was like, I would say like this, this boils down to advice of like, just be really extroverted and or drink a lot first. And, I just wrote to like these small town historical societies, like, look, I'm looking for information on my grandfather's family. They're all dead. What can you tell me? This is what I know. And like, it put me in contact with a lot of really kind people, which is always heartwarming, for the cold cockles of what used to be my heart. Or a normal person would probably enjoy it a lot too.
Well,
But
one thing I wanna throw out real quick is that when you ask the right people, and the right way too, they are more than happy to share that kind of
oh
information.
yeah, I also want to say, like, I do a lot of work with like academic resources, but having been an academic writer, like, people who publish journals and even books, especially scholarly books, don't get paid for that. Which means that if you write to them and you're just like, I am a humble historical fiction writer, I cannot afford your $59 book. Would you possibly let me read, chapter 2? They will, like, 99% of the time just send you the whole thing because they're not getting paid. Like, they don't, and like if somebody were to ask for any of my academic publications, I would be like, joy.
A lot of these people are just happy that you're reading them.
Actually, yeah. I mean, like, I wouldn't say to somebody like, okay, if you're writing a historical fiction novel, you don't write to your local history professor and say, like, can you read everything I wrote and tell me how accurate it is? But you can say, like, you would make their, like, decade probably if you were like, I'd love to read your paper that I found on Google Scholar that was published in, I don't know, the American Civil War Society Journal or blah, blah, blah.
And I'll give you credit.
Yeah, of
right?
course. Yeah.
Right.
No, like, I mean, one of the things I'm trying to do with Passions Rising is, like, very slowly making a bibliography of everything I've looked at that I thought was useful with some comments and putting that on basically like on Linktree. Partly for me, just because, after being in academia so long, it feels kind of wrong and bad to not have a bibliography. Like, it just feels like doing something dirty, like, not do that. But
gotta have some links and references in there, right?
Yeah, and I mean, okay. I figure, if I found it useful, maybe someday somebody else will too.
Okay. All right. Well, Audrey, let's wrap this up.
Sure.
What do you want to tell me? What do you want the audience to know at the end of this video? Besides, what's your information? Where can they find more stuff about you and your writing?
Well, they can check out my Linktree or Twitter, where I am trying to be on the social media.
And I will put them in the description as well.
Later this month, I have a plan where I'm going to find some vintage bread recipes and a whole bunch of vintage liquor. And I'm going to, like, do my version of drunk history, but with drunk baking. And I'm going to maybe disastrously, maybe wonderfully, I don't know what it'll do to my life, my career, my liver, whatever. But I will try and live stream it. And it could be awesome. It could be horrible. It could be an exciting train wreck.
All right.
The book itself, I mean, I hope people check it out. It's not, maybe, doesn't easily fit into a bunch of boxes. It's not, it's maybe a little different from some stuff, or maybe it's not. I don't know. But I tried really hard to make an engaging story about people who I would want to know more about. But above all, I think if there's something somebody's curious about that they want to learn about as a writer, there's a lot of tools out there, and you should be empowered to just ask people for help and reach out to sources, because there's a lot of those, and a lot of people are sitting at home kind of bored now.
I completely agree. And I will say, again, I have read the first 3 of Passion Rising, and it is very engaging. Like, it is not at all anything that I would ever have picked up. If I go to a store, I've been like, I would have never even gone into the section that it would reside in. And I just found it really interesting, and just the things that happen. And it really, again, it gives you like a little, not to make any baking references, but it gives you like a little taste, right? It gives you a little flavor, right? That it just kind of, it gives you like a really good sample of what happens in that time, and it was really interesting experience to kind of go through these characters' lives, because okay, so clearly I'm a dude, and to see how these women live their lives is so incredibly different. So again, it was just very, very interesting. So thank you.
Thank you. It really means a lot to me. Like, thank you for, I really am appreciating the Discord. Like, the community there is, like, legitimately, I'm really enjoying now. So thank you so much for putting that together.
You bet. And I'm really happy. And since you mentioned Discord, I guess I'll just throw in there, any author, reader, whoever is interested, everyone's welcome there, as long as they're being super polite. And it's a great way for all of us to not only engage with each other, promote ourselves, but is to build long-lasting kind of relationships. One thing that I've learned is that you and you've actually already brought this up. As you get to know more and more people, they are happy to share their information. So you were talking about people who are historians, but even authors. And I live out in an area that has tons of people, specifically with Dungeons and Dragons, and but there are also authors who just love to talk about the craft and share their knowledge. And it's very I want to say it builds an upward spiral where everyone kind of benefits. So it's been great,
Yeah,
and thank you.
it's really positive. It's like I've never had an office water cooler, but I feel like everything that's like good about that is probably like what that is. Like it's but I'm really enjoying it, and like really sincerely, thank you so much for building that community.
You bet, you bet. And we're hoping to only make it better. So
Yeah.
surprises are on the way. No spoilers, though. So
I'm good thing I'm sitting down. I'm usually sitting because I live a sedentary lifestyle. But
all right, well, we're going to call it right there. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Thank you, Audrey, for sitting with me for a little bit. And
thanks for having me.
You bet. Y'all have a great day, night,
Thanks.
whenever you watch it. Bye.